was Demas. Now, so we look at this right here, and I've got a lot of stuff on the screen tonight for the information. So Luke is widely considered. Say again? Yeah, it's green. Yeah.
It just turned on though.
Yeah. No, it's been green. Okay. So Luke is widely considered a Gentile as the only Gentile writer in the New Testament, primarily because Paul separates him from his Jewish colleagues in Colossians 4:10 through 14, labeling the others that he was talking about. What did he say? Of circumcision, which makes them what? Jews. Was Luke in those guys? Look, he separated them right there, and he mentions him later, which highly looks like that he is a Gentile. And then if you look at his name in the Greek, it's Lucas, and it's definitely a Greek name. So if you add all this up, and then you go in the books, it was Timothy, Philemon, and one more, William. What was the other one that Paul mentions Luke's name, and what they do, the stories that they're going through in Colossians. Yep. And then as he's talking about it, they have these same people that's on these mission trips, and he keeps mentioning them. And then if you just do addition by subtraction, Luke is the one who fits this mold. So the Bible doesn't say, hey, Luke's a Gentile, but you go through several different books and read it, but he is a Gentile. Any questions?
Also, at no point does Luke or Acts say this is Luke. Like the Gospel of Luke wasn't even on the original. It was like at a title, but it wasn't written with the manuscript. Like that was added by somebody, but because you could point, what's the first manuscripts they found were within a generation of Luke's death, so they were probably first-hand accounts received from him. So it's pretty pinpoint on this,
yeah.
that it's.
And everybody is in agreement that it is Luke as the author. And then, hey, when you go to Acts, you know where it talks about him in Acts, and it says, hey, he is the writer to Theophilus right there. So you know it's the same writer. So definitely the writer. And as a Gentile, he wrote 25% of the New Testament. That is a ton, as in the literature. Okay, let's continue. Let's keep going on. So what's Luke's occupation? He's a doctor. He's a physician. And then with Paul, let's kind of narrow that down. What is he to Paul? He's Paul's doctor. He is Paul's personal physician. And when Paul's talking about him, what does Paul think? What does Paul think of Luke?
This is his beloved physician.
This man has definitely been studying. He said, "Thee is my beloved physician." This tells you how much that Paul thinks of Luke, and where they had traveled together, and they had been on these missionary journeys. So Luke went with him on the second and the third missionary journey. On the second one, he got dropped off. You remember where that was? Where Luke got dropped off.
Luke joins Paul at the second missionary journey.
And then he gets dropped off, and then he gets picked back up on the third missionary journey, and then he travels with him all the way to Rome. Okay, now.
He was the pastor at Antioch.
At Antioch of Syria. That's right. So how educated was Luke? Hey, I may have to turn around and read that because my writing up here is really small. Scholars have noted that Luke had an outstanding command of the Greek language. His vocabulary is extensive and rich, and his style at times approaches that of classical Greek, as in is it preface or preface? Preface? As in the preface of his gospel in Luke 1, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, while at other times it seems quite Semitic. Now listen, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not good at literature. I'm not good in English. I have to look a lot of this stuff up right here. So I helped explain it, and I hope it helps somebody else as much as it helped me. So I'm like, what does Semitic mean? Using Hebrew verbs and adjectives to help translate Hebrew and Aramaic eyewitness reports while trying to write a polished Greek history for a writer, for a wider audience. Does this make sense what he was doing? So when he was explaining stuff, and as he was a Gentile, and that was his main audience, when he was going back and he was talking to Matthew and he was talking to Mark, and it says that it's a very, very good chance that he was even talking to the mother of Jesus, Mary. And when he was talking to people in Hebrew, he would put verbs that was from Hebrew and from Aramaic, but he would keep it in the Greek style, where the audience of the Hebrews and the Greek, and it would make sense. It would make more sense to them. Does that make sense? William, did you pick up on any of that? And I thought, hey, this dude was smart. This dude where he was even changing some of the verbs and languages, because, hey, do we not change some of our conversations depending on who we're talking to? Now listen, if I'm talking to Gavin and Hayden, it's going to be a whole lot different conversation if I'm talking to Brother David right there. Our lingo is going to be a whole lot different. This is the easiest way that I can explain this.
Can you give an example?
No, I cannot.
About it like this.
Yes, I don't need to ask for forgiveness right now.
When I was in high school, Dad had several Mexicans that worked for him in concrete. They could not do my Spanish homework from high school because their dialect of the Spanish language was so much different from like what we were being taught in school as Spanish, you know. So it's kind of I think a little bit like that too. He's taking that. He's trying to bridge that gap.
He is bridging the gap. That's the best way to explain it. Luke was highly, highly educated. So we go into, now, as a physician, we know that he was a very analytical man, a careful thinker, and that while he was well educated. Now, did you know this right here? If somebody would have asked you before tonight, and when you said, was Luke an apostle? What would you have said no? You would have said no? Raise your hand if anybody would have said yes. Hey, I was in the gray area. And Weston was with me today, and he was over there studying for his presentation. I said, Weston, let me ask you a question. I said, was Luke an apostle? He goes, I think he was. And I said, I'm not really for sure. I said, I know either Blair or Missy is going. Yeah. Hey, I'm not gonna lie. I probably would have leaned into yes. But he was not an eyewitness of Jesus right there. He was not an apostle. So, I mean, some of the simplest things that you would think that you've read your Bible your whole life right there, you would think you know, and I didn't. I would have guessed wrong. Yeah.
There was a billboard in Clarksville going through New Providence for a long time there for a church, and it had their pastor listed as apostle such and such, you know, whatever his name was. And I used to always, when I would see that, it's like, that's about as
Wrong.
much of a lie as you can put it. You got it on a billboard.
Yes,
on the highway.
absolutely. So again, as we continue to keep learning about Luke, now listen, if we get to a point where we need to slow down and you've got a question, hey, just raise your hand. Okay. Only through tradition we know that Luke came from Antioch of Syria, and that perhaps he heard the gospel through the Apostle Paul. It said it is a very, very high chance that when Paul was going through and he was going on his missionary journeys right there, that Luke would have heard Paul and could have very well, high percentage chance, became a believer under Paul's teaching. Again, stuff that I did not know. Any questions, any comments?
It's amazing that he did 25%.
Yeah, 25% of the New Testament. Yeah,
Remember, he is the most content written in the Bible. He is the author of the most content written in the Bible. Not the most books.
yeah.
The most words.
The only thing that would have changed that is if they nailed down that Paul wrote Hebrews. If Paul would, we knew for sure who that author of Hebrews was. A lot of people think that Paul is, and a lot of people think that he isn't right there.
I think it's Luke.
Yeah, yeah.
I told you.
So that would have been the only difference. Okay, let's continue to keep looking on who Luke is. Now, let's look and understand who the person of Luke is. Luke was loyal because he stayed with Paul for many years. He was brave because he went through 3 imprisonments with Paul. He was Paul's personal physician, and we know all the terrors and the tribulations that he went through, that he was with Paul. So let's name a few things. Well, what were some of the things that you know with Luke being his personal physician and being there with Paul in these missionary journeys? What did he go through? He was. He was.
More than likely was in prison,
Yeah, I read 2 times for sure, maybe 3.
They know that he was there with Paul, but maybe not physically
And what William's talking about is like where he was under house arrest at Caesarea and then in Rome. What he's talking about, was he in house arrest with him, or was he able to come and go and then bring him food and whatnot? But he went through all this stuff, and as a traveler, they said he was well educated as a traveler in sailing and navigation and on land. Really sharp. Karen, I seen your hand raised. Oh.
So whatever ailed Paul, it must have been major, right? If he needed, because Luke was with him, I'm guessing for this specific problem.
It says that my beloved physician, that he was his personal physician. Yeah. And you know, was Paul well educated? Absolutely. Under say his name, Gamaliel. So you have 2 highly educated people right here. So I could really see why these 2 were yin-yanging, as highly educated as they were. And we continue. He was very humble. He was humble because he never mentioned his own name in the books of Acts or in the book of Luke. Only he would say me or we. He never did say it. Now, if you was a very prideful person, what does a prideful person like to do? I did this, I did that. I definitely wrote the book of Luke, and I definitely wrote the book of Acts right here, and I did these things. He was a very humble, gentle, loyal, brave, and as William, a pastor. And when I think maybe like the opposite of Peter. You know, when I think of Peter, I'm thinking brash. Man, give me another soldier and I'll cut his ear off too right there. And, you know, just hardcore. And I think of him being gentle, humble, kind, intelligent. A really, really, really good person and intelligent. Okay? We know that he's the author because of the process of elimination in the book. We've already been talking about this, but we'll go back over it. Of Acts, it comes there as the most logical one who wrote it. Acts and whoever wrote Acts, I may have messed that up, also wrote the book of Luke, because the book of Acts begins mentioning the former letter of Theophilus right there, which is the Gospel of Luke. So whoever wrote one wrote the other, because it was the same. It was like 2 volumes, volume 1 and volume 2. And once he got done with volume 1, He went into Acts, talking about the Acts of the apostles right there, and stayed really good in order, and we'll go over that here in a minute. Okay. Now, a lot of this come from MacArthur. Luke, he was a historian. Look at the first 3 verses in Luke. He states that he has sources. He's done major research, first-hand accounts, and I should have put this in parentheses on the accounts that he had talked to Matthew and Mark. William, did you see that probably Mark wrote before Matthew?
Yes, and that probably both of these Gospels were written
Before.
Regardless, that probably both of those Gospels were written prior to Luke writing, yes.
And he would have been able to talk to them and discuss, on first-hand accounts what they seen, what they knew, and just think as an historian, man, this guy was writing everything down, and he was putting it in order. He was writing dates down, and he was getting everything the way that it needed to be. And then we see that he was a theologian. Verse 3 points out this: in order, an accurate account, an orderly account. And look, I'm going to read verse 3. So we're going. It seemed good to me also. Good to who? Me. He didn't say Luke. It seemed good to me also, having followed all these things closely from some times past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, right there. So when he's doing this, look, he says, it seemed good. And I'm going to go over this here a little bit more, so I don't have to go into detail, but you can see how it, not only was he a historian, he was a really good theologian. A good theologian is someone who is analytical, who is systematic, who is logical. Now, when you do a deep dive on this study, you're going to see that, hey, it's in chronological order. He starts with John the Baptist. He ends in Luke with the ascension. But there is times that he wants to make a point, and he'll jump off to hammer this point down a little bit. But still, it's in order. It's in order. And he's making sure he's doing these things a whole lot more than the other Gospels, especially the Synoptic Gospels. Okay. This is what we're going to talk about. Now Luke is different. Luke is different than the other Gospels because it focuses on the weak, the suffering, the outcast. Here's examples. The Good Samaritan. Now, would the Jews love to hear the story about the Good Samaritan? What'd you say, Karen? Why not? So what did the Jews think about Samaritans? Oh, they're a mixed class. It that definitely looked down upon. But what did the Good Samaritan do? What did the priest do? What did the Levite do? Went on around. How did that make the Jews look? Terrible. And then here's the Good Samaritan, said, "Hey, come on, buddy. Hey, I'll help you up. I'll help get you fixed up, put you up for a place to stay." But do you see how his audience is going to go toward the Gentiles? And then you look, the prodigal son, the rich man, and Lazarus. You think Lazarus is well looked upon?
Think about the mind of a doctor.
Hey, think about the mind of the doctor. And that is a very good point, where he's looking as a physician, as a doctor, and he's looking at these things and he's labeling these things as he's depicting them and doing it.
He also doesn't mention in the story about the woman who was bleeding, he doesn't mention that no physician could heal her, where the other Gospels did. So, you know,
Maybe,
I made a joke about that.
yeah.
You know, like
So,
he didn't want to put the doctor in bed.
maybe he did have a little bit of pride right there that that the great physician could heal him, but the other physicians couldn't. At a very good point. I didn't hear that. And then you see it the tax collector. Did the Jews love them? Absolutely not, right there, because they were taking the money. But do you see the parables that Luke is talking about and how it's in the cone of the Gentiles? Definitely talking to a Gentile audience. Now, we're going, now that we're talking about Luke, which is a synoptic gospel, let's make sure we know where we're going with the other ones and how they differ, okay? So the synoptic gospels are which? Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew was writing to a Jewish audience. Mark was writing to a Roman audience, John Mark. Luke was writing to a Gentile audience. So when you see this, do you see God's gospel, Jesus' gospel, is reaching everybody? It's getting away from the Jews, the Hebrews. It's getting away, focusing God's chosen, and we're seeing it open up to everybody. Okay, so I just give me a sec, and we'll break it down. Okay, they see together as a common view Jesus' life. So when you look up and listen, I couldn't have answered that earlier today in a clear way. It's where you see together. So me, William, and Daniel, we're going on a trip out west. And we see everything, and then we come back, and Jason says, "Hey, Mike, what stood out to you on that trip?" And then, I may say, "Hey, man, them big old trees was just amazing." And then somebody may ask William, and he may point out something else. And then Daniel could look at something else. Okay, we all went on the same trip. We all seen the same stuff. But there's going to be different things that we've seen together, but that's going to be a little bit different. And that's where you have the three synoptic gospels on Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
How does John see it?
Give me just a second. Okay?
You knew that.
Let me hear it. What was? No, but boy, let me tell you, he done his work. He done his research, and he done his due diligence of going and interviewing and seeing people and hearing, and not only using Matthew and Mark stories, but added other stories to it with the help of what? The Holy Spirit helping him lead right there. Jason?
That kind of points to why there's parables only found in Luke and not found in the other three gospels. Lost sheep, the lost coin.
So it gave an exact number of parables that Luke had that the other gospels didn't have, and then it gave two different things. One was the number 9, and then it gave something else that it gave a different view, and gave a lot of different stuff where Luke had that the other gospels didn't have. Absolutely.
Said it was the most comprehensive too. Luke is the most. It contains more than the others. And I didn't realize until today.
I've got that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Keep rolling. I love it.
What I didn't realize probably in this was that Mark, his version of the gospel, is most likely Peter's story. It's what Peter gave Mark.
That's true. I seen that today.
I never realized really that to get to diving into this. So you've got Luke that's getting stuff from Mark, who has basically got his stuff from Peter. He's talked to Matthew firsthand. He's gotten what Paul's told him. Probably Mary, Jesus' mother Mary, he's got a wide circle in his stuff of who he's. Whereas John is probably just writing down, Matthew's just writing down what they remember more so instead of asking these other people what they remember most about it. So I thought that was interesting.
Very.
Did not Luke live only about 70, 80 years?
what I heard around 70 years is what MacArthur.
I think 68. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
58 to 65 is what someone said. He said 70, 68. I've got two hands. Hey, Karen? Oh, absolutely. And if we can get that far, we're going to say, hey, he clearly says, listen, I am not an eyewitness. He clearly states that.
So if Luke is a Gentile speaking to a Gentile audience, Matthew, was Matthew Jewish?
Yes.
He was.
Okay, so Mark speaking to a Roman audience, was Mark like, because Mark wasn't an eyewitness either, was Mark also taught under Paul? Because Paul was a Roman citizen.
So I can't answer that because I didn't do a deep dive. I didn't do a deep dive into Mark.
It just makes sense to
Yeah.
who you're talking to.
But it did clearly say that his focus was more on the Roman audience right there. And say what you ask again.
So if Luke is speaking to a Gentile audience, was Mark a Roman citizen who also learned under Paul? Because Paul was a Roman citizen.
Mark was a Jew. Yeah, he was a Jew, but Paul's like a unicorn basically of being a Jew and a Roman citizen. He's one of the very.
And I think he bought that. Yeah. Yeah. I'll do some homework on that. I'll do some homework. Okay, let's keep rolling. Still talking about the Synoptic Gospels. What is good about the Synoptic Gospels is that they record the events surrounding the same person, Jesus Christ, during the same part in his life, in the same locations, yet with slightly different emphasis aimed at different readers. And again, remember, Luke clearly says, hey, I am not an eyewitness. I'm talking to people. I'm doing the homework. I'm going out as a detective and getting as much information with the help of the Holy Spirit to get his information. Okay? Now, you said the Gospel of John, right? Missy, wasn't you talking about that? Okay. So now, the book of John doesn't have traditional parables. If you go into this and you say, oh, well, you got the vine and the branches, it clearly stated that it didn't have traditional parables like the other three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke had. The Synoptic Gospels focus on what Jesus did. The book of John focuses on who Jesus is, talking about the deity of Jesus. You go to John 1:1. John states that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, talking about Jesus and how they all are together. They are all one, talking about the Trinity. So the first three talk about what Jesus did and all the miracles and all the parables. John is more a theologian, and he's saying who Jesus is. Now, I think this is going to work out really good on the time. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hey, good. Take your time. Take your time on that. So now that we've kind of got, I hope we have a better feel about the four Gospels. How we have the three Synoptic Gospels, we have John, how we have the Jewish, the Roman, the Gentile backgrounds and how they're going. And then we see what Luke's talking about. He's an eyewitness. He was not an eyewitness. Matthew and Mark were. Okay. Samantha, you good? Yeah. More the time frame. The time frame. William, you want to help me out on that?
I would say the significance is of him mentioning that is points to the authenticity of that he was the one that actually wrote it. Because I think the way MacArthur spoke on it was like, so if he wasn't really selling books at the time, but if you was just wanting to get this out to as many people as possible, he would have just thrown in there that he was with them, you know. So he's kind of knocking himself down a little bit by saying that he wasn't an eyewitness a little bit there, but it also helps point to for them to authenticate it that it was him. So I think that's probably the most important, according to MacArthur, when I listened to what he was saying on it today. His stuff's just so good. He's not the most fiery preacher and make you feel certain things, but he has just so much information in his stuff it'll overload you a little bit.
And a lot of it that you couldn't get out of the Bible, it would be through church tradition and what they would go through, where you would have to pull from different places that you could authenticate, that it was part that Luke wrote Acts and the book of Luke right there.
He even mentioned that. He said on the tradition part, so a lot of stuff, he said if you go to Israel, there would be signs and stuff everywhere. Well, this is the rock that Jesus was standing by when he said this. Well, when did they start saying that? Well, around 1300 AD. Probably not the rock where that happened, But like this, the earliest manuscript was within a generation of when this stuff happened. So pretty good chance that it was real and authentic, and this didn't just show up a thousand years later either. He hit home at that pretty good. He said a lot of that stuff's a money grab in Israel that'll have a sign by it and just want people to come and look at it and not traditionally authenticated.
Absolutely. Now, before we go into the four verses, I'm going to finish up on the Gospels right there. The four Gospels work together to provide a complete testimony of Jesus, a beautiful portrait of the God-man. Although the Gospels differ slightly in theme, the central subject is the same. All present Jesus as the one who died to save sinners. All record his resurrection, whether the writer presented Jesus as king, a servant, the Son of Man, or the Son of God. They had one common goal, and that common goal right there, that people had to put their trust and faith and believe in Jesus and get away from the old covenant on the sacrificial system right there. Okay, now we get in here, and the first four verses, they say, is just a masterful prologue. So we look at this, and a prologue is an introductory section that sets the stage. It provides background, or it hooks the audience right here. And this is what these first four verses that it does in the book of Luke. Luke 1 through 4 is considered a masterful prologue because it establishes the gospel as a historical, research, orderly, and trustworthy account. And I'm going to read them again, and because if I don't point it out, you'll miss it. It establishes the gospel as one, historical, highly researched, very orderly, chronological order right there, and a very trustworthy account by the people that he talked to and how the Holy Spirit helped him. Okay, so who'd like to read? Hey, one thing I want to tell you that I didn't say. The first four verses is one long sentence. Did people read that anywhere? It's one sentence. So we're going to go through and we're going to read all four verses. Who would like to read 1 and 2?
Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us.
Somebody read 3 and 4.
It seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught.
Okay, before I go to the next slide, I'm going to go back on, and let's look at some highlighted parts that will break this down. When he says, inasmuch, many have undertaken. Now, for the ones that's got your NLT, that you got, it says, many people have set out to write these accounts. Okay? So when you see this, many have undertaken. Listen, you've got Matthew and Mark that's already wrote this. You've got other people that's wrote this. This ain't something new. This ain't something that he's like, hey, I'm bringing this up right there, okay? To compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished. This is what Jesus has already done. Jesus has already come to earth. He's died, resurrected. He's ascended to heaven. These things has already happened, okay? Just as those who from the beginning, okay? So when we look at that, they use the eyewitness reports. So he's saying, look, those who were there from the beginning, the ones who seen Jesus get crucified, they've seen this right here. They've seen this. Were eyewitness and ministers of the word have delivered them unto us. Why would I underline us? He is. He's saying, I'm not only a Gentile, I'm a believer. Hey, I'm one. I'm one that believes. I've done this. And then we go to verses 3 and 4. It seemed good to who? Do you say Luke? Hey, he says, hey, he says to me, to also having followed those things closely, where he was, I keep thinking of a detective, where he's fine-tuning, he's studying, he's asking, he's writing these things, he's recording these things. For some time past, to write an orderly, not just an account, an orderly account. He's like, okay, this happened first. So what was one of the first things that we're going to see that he wrote? He goes all the way back to John the Baptist and Zechariah. Are you feeling me right here where we're going? So you remember, and then Zechariah, an angel comes to him when he's in the temple, and he says, hey, your prayer is going to be answered. You're going to have a baby. And what Zechariah do? He doubted him. And the angel says, look, since you didn't believe me, you're not going to be able to talk until the baby's born, but you better name him John. His name's going to be John right there. So he comes out, and they can't talk, and they know something's happened. But without me going too deep into next week's lesson right there, is you see, then Mary gets pregnant, the Immaculate Conception. They're cousins. And then, hey, who's going to be the forerunner of Jesus? John is. And then he goes all the way, not to Jesus, he goes to Zechariah and John the Baptist. And then he finishes up all the way to the ascension. And he's doing it in order, in order, in order. Very good starting. I mean, how many people would have thought to go back to John the Baptist? And remember when her and Mary, Elizabeth and Mary met, and John jumped inside and talking about the Holy Spirit? I mean, that gives me cold chills hearing stuff that what they point. Okay, let's keep rolling. For the most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty. So he's telling this Roman official, listen, Theophilus, he's already been hearing God's word, the things that you have already been taught. You can take this to the bank. It's real. With certainty. This is this huge prologue that's wrote in this Greek, classical Greek language right here. And then here we go. Okay, so now, let's start breaking down some stuff. The first 4 verses of Luke's Gospel are one sentence in the original Greek or classical Greek, depending on which way that you read that. They are written in refined academic classical style, but for the rest of the Gospel, Luke didn't use the language of the scholars, but what did he use? Just common street language where they would understand. Now, Luke wrote this so people would understand about Jesus, and not so they would admire his brain and and how sharp that he was with his literary skill. How humble is that? If you're really super smart, Don't a lot of people want you to know, hey, how smart I am right there? And listen, basically, he dumbs it down. He's not worried about, I want to show you how educated I am, probably from Antioch of Syria, where they had what you would either call universities or what we would call schools to train them right there. He said, nope, I'm going to do this in the prologue. I'm getting it done. I'm done with that. And then I'm going to talk where you can understand about who? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, just to reach a much wider audience.
Reach a much wider audience.
Again, think about a good doctor. If any of us go to the doctor and we're like, he's a good doctor. Why? Because he explained it and he talked to me like a real person.
But,
Not on my level.
but you say that, Blair. How many times have you been to a doctor? Okay, listen, I ain't going to say you, I'm going to say me. How many times that I've been to a doctor and I'm either listening for me or I'm listening for one of the boys, and when I walk out, what did he just say?
That's it. Nurse walks in. Your nurse walks in.
Yeah, the nurse walks in, I'm like, hey, sit down. We need to have a conversation. This dude just spoke Greek to me, and I had no clue what he just said right there.
Were you wearing the hearing aids when you go? Or?
It was more like, hey, is my son going to live or is he going to die right there?
It's strep throat. Is he going to live?
But listen, hey, Luke says, no, hey, I'm going to come down to common language where we can understand this. And then I thought it was amazing where he uses the Hebrew verbs and the adjectives to explain stuff that he's seen that would tie it together, where the Hebrews, the Jews, the Greeks, they would all understand it better.
I think it's a gift. He's trying. He's making that effort. But that's also a gift to be able to reach different people, different groups. It's truly a
It
gift
is.
to be able to do that.
Karen?
You both did that, just the fact that he was scholarly enough that he could switch from those three languages and that culture that he was a part of. That was probably,
I think it comes down to the humble side. I think it just comes down, it's not about me. It's about Jesus. And he's trying to get people from a head knowledge to a heart knowledge. Okay? Now, verse 1. Let me see what time it is. Oh. Okay, we'll stop at verse 1. It's 7:30. This is fun. I've really enjoyed this lesson. Okay, many have taken in hand. Many have already written histories about Jesus, Matthew and Mark. He definitely got firsthand information from them. These writings mentioned here contain things already commonly known and believed. This is not new information right here. This wasn't new bulletin board material. He wasn't trying to go in right there. And then it talks about verse 1, us. When Luke used the word us, he inserted himself with the community of the believers. He had put his faith and trust in the work of Jesus. We're going to stop there. It's 7:30. I hope understanding the Gospels a little bit more, who the writers, who they were writing to, and a little bit more understanding about who Luke was, how he was humble, sharp, intelligent, brave, all these things, how he was Paul's personal physician, how all this is going to tie together. William, when do you come back in and teach?
Next week.
You do? Okay. William starts at verse 2. Hey, I think now we can take off. I think now we can take off and we can start making up some ground. And I can give Williams a lot of information if he needs help.
Send me the next video.
John, you want to close this in prayer?